guys, this is Ginger Van Deen here with another Data Fun Friday. It's Friday afternoon, so it's time to have some fun with data. Thanks for joining me. Today we're going to look at our information in a little bit more detail. We talked last week about how I've been thinking a lot lately about social determinants of health, which are factors in a person's life other than what we typically think of as healthcare factors that affect people's healthcare outcomes. And one of them that we talked about last week was social connectedness. And I talked about how we are capturing data in our electronic health records that we could use to sort of as an indirect way to measure social connectedness. And one piece of data that I talked about last week was whether or not someone has an emergency contact listed on their record, or whether or not someone has anybody listed on their record as involved in their treatment. So last week we looked at this query and we played around with it a little bit, looking at counting individuals who may not have had an emergency contact listed. We looked at commenting this out, and then it would be anyone who has who doesn't have anybody listed on their record. And then we talked about how you could look at just clients who'd had a service. We also, another thing I thought about after we got done talking last week is you could look at folks who have somebody other than who don't have anyone other than an emergency contact listed on the record, which all you'd have to do to change that is change this equal sign to a not equal sign. That's what that little not equals means. So lots of different things we talked about last week. Something that I wanted to get into this week is how you could then change that into something where you could compare both numbers at the same time. So clients who did and did not have an emergency contact listed on the record. So I thought I'd go over that query today. So again, we're going to start with our little subtable here. We're going to copy that down here. And what we're going to do that's different is instead of doing this little not in trick, we're going to do what's called a left join, which just says show me everything from one table, and then if there's information in this other table, show me that. So we're going to do a very similar thing to what we did before. We're going to be looking at the clients table, and we're going to select the client ID. And then we're going to do a left join to this little subtable that we built here. And we'll just say has contact as the table. And what we're going to do is just add an additional little column to this table that'll just have yes in it as let's see, contact there. I'm calling it kind of a silly name. Okay. So then we're going to do a little join here. So left join to has contact on has contact dot client ID equals CE dot client ID. Okay, and then what we can do is add that column we added here as has contact there. Okay, so now what this is going to do, and we can still do a count, right? So we'll do count, and we'll still do distinct because it's good to have that in there. We'll say count of clients, and then we'll, okay, now if we try to run this just like that, we're going to get an error. Because anytime that you're doing more than one field, so see how up here we were just getting one answer, but now we're actually, we have an answer and also like a category. So we have to include that category in what's called a group by. So we're going to group by has contact there, and then that will work. Okay, so now this is kind of interesting, right? You can see there are 2,800 clients who have an emergency contact. Oh, sorry, we still have this marked as not equals. Let's put that back to equals. Okay. All right, so there's 582 people who have an emergency contact, and then 8,000 people who have a null. Null is what goes in a field in a list if there's no data there. And that's still helpful and interesting, and we can kind of tell what that means here. But sometimes it's nicer to have that actually say no, just because if you're going to drop this into like a data visualization, other people might get confused by null versus no. So I'm just going to use this little thing called a case statement to change that. So a case statement just says if this, then that. So I'll show you how that works. So case when this equals yes, then yes, else no, and you always say that at the end of a case statement, as contact there. And then because we're doing that little doodad, we got to put that same little text down here in the group by, except not the as. That's just a little rule you kind of have to memorize. Or just watch my video and then you can know it. So that's pretty cool. So now you have a yes and a no, and you have your count of clients. And what's nice about that is now that you've got a yes or a no kind of directly linked to that client ID, you could group that by anything, right? So we could do another left join to our client visit table and just then also group by whether or not people have had a client visit. And like last week where we only looked yes or no. So we could say left join, and we'll make a little subtable here. Select star from client visits, CV, and we'll do CV.client ID, and then we'll do CV, and then we'll just do yes has had service. And we'll just do any service for now. We'll call this has services on, and we'll do has services.client ID equals CE.client ID. And then we can do the very same thing, but with that. Sorry, had service and has service are going to get confusing. Service recorded. We'll do that because it's a little less confusing. So we'll say case when has services dot service recorded equals equals yes, then yes, else no, and as services recorded. Okay, and then we just got to add that down, same little doodad, down to our group by, and you just separate it with a comma. Okay, so let's look at that. Okay, so out of people who have had no service recorded, there are some who still have a contact person listed, or an emergency contact, that's what we're looking at right now. Out of people who have had a service recorded, again, let's see, so about 6,000 people don't have someone listed as an emergency contact, 577 do. So same thing, let's just take out this little thing that's only looking at emergency contacts and look at any kind of contact. Okay, so again, 19 people who have never had a service recorded still have some kind of contact listed. Of the people who have had a service recorded, about half have at least somebody listed as a contact, and a little more than half don't have anyone listed as a contact. So you can just keep adding in little flags, and then you can assign those to that client ID and do different analytics that way. So next week we're going to get into how you would put that into Power BI and do some really cool visualization. So I'm really looking forward to that. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up today. If you have any questions, please add a comment or feel free to send me an email. If you're interested in seeing more of these videos, please subscribe to my channel. And if you'd like more information about some of these projects, such as how to get your credible database in your own hands like I'm doing, please check out my website, which is missiondrivendata.com. All right, guys, take care. Have a nice weekend.